Good evening, everybody. We're going to take a look at the tropics. Starting to heat up a little bit. You can see I have a lot of tabs. So we're going to start in the Pacific where we have Henriette. Um, Here, kind of east of Hawaii. Not much to look at right now as it's over some cooler water. But you can see it's well east of Hawaii and just well to the north and east. Pretty tight track spread. With that, what's interesting about this one, though, is it's forecast to re-intensify back up to a Category 1 or strong tropical storm at least. And the reason for that is if you remember, we talked about how the waters in the subtropics or the mid latitudes are a lot warmer than usual this year. And so, uh, as this storm comes up here, it's actually going to get up into some warmer water, 26 to 27 Celsius, which is 80 to 82 Fahrenheit or so, which is more favorable and could re-intensify. And it's fairly rare to see storms in this area north of Hawaii, so this will be kind of a curiosity, but shouldn't bother anyone for now. And now south of Mexico, we have Evo. It's a pretty healthy circulation, but a little bit less convection than earlier. I think the diurnal minimum is getting to it. And this is going to move well to the south and west of Mexico, thankfully, pretty common this time of year, as the ridge to the north is strong, so this should move well away, and hopefully just kind of fizzle out as it gets further west. And we'll see that. That's in the official forecast. It is forecast to become a hurricane as it passes southwest of the Baja, but then will weaken in cooler waters and drier air off to the west. So now switching over to the Atlantic, this is what's left of Tropical Storm Dexter. It's now an extratropical cyclone. You can see kind of got these frontal features, baroclinic leaf, looks a lot like a warm front. This kind of looks like a cold front. So yeah, it's very extratropical now as it's moving off in the North Atlantic. We do have a couple areas of interest still marked in the tropical weather outlook. We have off the East Coast, we have an area that doesn't look quite as promising for development as it did a couple days ago, but it's still there. And then this wave 96L over the Central Atlantic, we'll show in a minute. That looks like it's going to be kind of curving up into the Central Atlantic, where we talked the other day about how it was possible it could come off to the west, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. If you look at the large scale, in the Atlantic, you see this is the principal water. You can see there's a lot of moisture here along the ITCZ. Especially in Africa, you do kind of have some drier air, though, to the north making its way in. And that'll become important. Let's talk about future systems here in a minute. So for our Invest 96L, not very healthy, very little convection with it. But we talked about that stability, and we'll look at that again in a minute. That sinking air or subsidence, those are all issues out there still. And the waters are also not super warm up here, only around 79 to 80, so that's not really helping it either. And if you look at the forecast now, there's that upper low. So look at the European model was correct with that, and this is going to end up probably getting caught by that and moving to the north, and it may even prevent it from developing. So the best bet for this would be after it interacts the upper low up here in the North Atlantic, and some models do still show that. Because you can see the shear is pretty low right now across a lot of the Atlantic, the MDR, so a lot lower than it has been, but you kind of have this big higher shear region where the upper low is, and so not too favorable for this as it gets up into there, but maybe once it gets north of that upper low, it'll have a little bit better chance. Whoops, let's go back to our tabs. There we go. And you can kind of see that here. So now we're going to look at our kind of potential main system of interest, and that's a wave that's forecast to come off of Africa in about 2 days. You can see on the GFS here. And this kind of caught up in this really big monsoon trough. And basically monsoon trough, you get these southwest flow here, you have northeast flow here. So it generates a lot of spin, a lot of vorticity in there. And sometimes this area, these can focus and try to form a TC or two somewhere. In this case, it looks like the eastern end of it's going to try to spin up, at least on the GFS, that's what it's showing. And it kind of develops into a tropical cyclone in about 5 or 6 days off to the west. If you look at the ECNWF, it's a little bit of a different idea. You kind of have that same monsoon trough, and rather than just one area, it actually kind of tries to spin up two on different parts. And this is pretty common with these monsoon troughs, or ITCZ breakdowns, they're sometimes called. You can see that there's these different solutions, and it kind of depends on how much convection we get and where convection is. And but it looks like models are trending towards something probably forming or trying to form out here in the Central Atlantic. And we'll see. Like I said, we looked at what our current system is doing, not much convection. And so you see a forecast like this, and you may be a little bit skeptical. But what's going to help this is you have basically a very favorable intra-seasonal state where we talked about the MJO, this large-scale pulse of rising air, and that's over Africa and the East Atlantic now. We also have a Kelvin wave, which is sort of a similar type of feature moving east. And we also have another tropical, large-scale tropical wave, an equatorial Rossby wave, and Rossby waves move west. And so you're going to have you have all these features basically lining up over the central Atlantic or over the eastern Atlantic over this couple days. And so it's going to favor rising air. It's going to favor convection. You can see in Eric Webb, his tweet. He's a good follow for a lot of this large-scale tropical stuff if you're interested. But basically, this wave will have about as favorable of a large-scale pattern as you can get this time of year. So we'll see if that's enough to overcome the dry air. But certainly, what it will do is it'll provide favorable shear. You can see the upper-level winds here from the European ensemble. Very pronounced upper easterlies with this large anticyclone aloft. So this will be very favorable upper winds. The shear is all the way up here, like 30 north. So this is about as favorable as it gets in the Atlantic in terms of upper winds. But the problem is this dry air, and that's what we're going to have to keep an eye on. This dry tongue from the northeast Atlantic is going to move out ahead of this, and some of this could try to wrap its way into the circulation. And so, combined with, like I said, the fact that the waters are not super warm out here and this dry air is in, I think this development's going to be slow until you maybe get somewhere kind of around 50 west. Oops, let's see. Because at 50 west or so, kind of in the western part of the MDR, that's about where the water starts to warm up. And so as this moves off in this direction, maybe we'll have a little bit better chance of development. But, you look at this is an area average sounding to kind of get an idea of the environment. You can see the mid-level relative humidity is in the 60%. It's actually pretty favorable for this part of the basin. Very low shear, like we talked about. I mean, just light easterlies. That's about as perfect for development as you can get. What we do notice is there's a little bit of this. If you ever looked at atmospheric sound, as you can tell, there's a little bit of a inversion. And what that means is this kind of makes it hard for air to rise. A little bit of a cap in the mean. And so that tells you there's a little bit of stability still there. So that's why this still could have a little bit of a hard time generating convection at times. And so I don't think it's a guarantee to develop, but certainly it's looking quite possible. This is just that stability. Like I said, it's come up a little bit in the last day or so, in the last week or so, but still below average. And so that's kind of suppressing convection overall. We'll look at the ensembles. This is the perturbations of the same model. So the GFS ensemble is very enthusiastic and developing something out here over the central Atlantic in the next 8 days. It would probably move in the general direction of the Northeast Caribbean or Lesser Antilles, so worth keeping an eye on there, although, like I said, this is still 8 to 10 days out. Euro ensemble, kind of the same idea. Again, there's kind of some uncertainty, and maybe it's north, maybe it's south, which part of this develops, or if at all, and so we'll just have to keep an eye on this in the coming days. And one thing, it's a little early to really speculate too much, but I just want to kind of plant some of the long-term pattern seeds. If you look at about a week out, so 8 to 10 days, kind of the range of our good predictability. You have what looks like a negative P&A pattern, where you have this ridge over the Gulf of Alaska, trough over the western U.S., and a ridge over the eastern U.S. And if you have a hurricane somewhere in the southwest Atlantic with this pattern, it often will head towards Florida or the Carolinas. So that's a very dangerous steering pattern. So if you go look at this, is some research I did. This is the composite pattern for 500 millibar pattern for when you have Florida East Coast hurricanes. You can see it's that ridge over the Gulf of Alaska, trough out west, and ridge to the east. And so this kind of is on paper a very dangerous steering pattern. But you'll notice this is day 8. So day 8, like we talked about, any potential system is probably going to be in this area. It's not going to be near Florida yet. That would be, anything in the Southwest Atlantic or Bahamas region would be, probably 4 or 5 days beyond that. And we don't really, that's kind of beyond the range where we can really predict with any sort of certainty. And, whether this system develops, where it develops, there's a huge range of possibilities here. But if you look at what the pattern's going to do, models getting into longer range, what it seems like is the ridge wants to build west just a little bit. So now, this whole pattern's kind of shifted west a little bit, and it's not quite as classic of a pattern anymore. So this might be something important to monitor, basically where does the system come to, if a system forms and comes a little further south, might be able to sneak under a ridge, but if something's further north and this trough comes down, you might see something sneak out further east. And one thing about all this, the reason I bring this up is just that you're going to see probably, if this does develop over the next, week or so, you're going to see dozens of posts and things with different solutions. Some will be out to sea, some will be right towards land, and ensembles will be all over. So this is why there's a lot of uncertainty in the pattern, and this just goes to show why you can't take any long range solution with any kind of certainty, just because there's so much that can happen. If this stays a little bit further east, it might favor a more threatening steering pattern. But if this ridge slides west, then you might open up a deeper trough and could easily grab something and take it north. So these will just be the pieces that we want to watch. Like I said, the first thing is really, does this develop, or does the dry air and stability that's been present, does that kill it off like it has kind of been doing for a while? But if it doesn't, we do have some favorable parameters that it'll have to work with, and certainly something to watch in the coming week. So that's all I've got tonight, and thanks everybody.